For more frequent video uploads, feel free to support AnimeKouhai at Patreon. The link is in the description below.
By comparison, the Demon Lord Luminous had it easy. With her vast magical force, she could cast spatial motion as much as she wanted, so she just poofed her way back home. Apparently, she'd contact me later about the musician exchange we talked about. Hanada, meanwhile, was still in town, watching the kids study at our church and helping out with battle training. Right now, we had no really suitable teacher for those children. Hanada had been busy keeping the peace in the western nations with her paladins, but now we'd be helping out with that, taking over the southern portions, and that opened some time in her schedule.
If you like, would you mind helping the kids a little? I'm good with magic and everything, but I'm not so hot at teaching.
Sure, this town's been added to my list of warp portal destinations, so I can watch them when I'm free.
She gladly accepted the offer, and believe me, I was elated. I never had any intention of giving the children back, really. Now that I had my concerns about Yuki, I figured it'd be better to keep them away from the kingdom of Anglacia for a bit. That's why I brought them over to Tempest, and luckily, the festival was a good excuse for that. Their school transfer had already been arranged, which was a blessing in disguise, since it was getting hard to provide much guidance for them in Anglacia's academy. Now that I had combined them with their elemental spirits, they had grown to be pretty darn strong. They were too much for any normal teacher, and it was about time they had a real instructor watching them. Yuki himself mentioned that paladins were a good match for spirits. I kind of inadvertently turned the conversation toward the spirits as we spoke, but looking back, he must have known about my plans from the start. I think I was intending to keep that a secret.
Report. You were keeping it a secret.
Yeah, I sure was. And my blabbing, it seemed to have rankled Raphael a bit. I mean, come on, it was gonna come out either way. You're focusing on that too much. No need to get too worried about it. Right, sorry. I had already heard some disquieting things about Yuki, but I blurted it out anyway. Maybe part of me really wanted to believe him. But I made him privy to things he didn't need to know about, and I regretted it now. I'd need to be more careful next time. Thus, I would be taking responsibility for the children's care, and given the situation, Hanada's assistance was a godsend. Through the festival, the kids had really taken a shine to Hanada, and I had no problem with her taking the job. But Hanada as a teacher, huh? Maybe I should join the class, then. So I was seated alongside the rest of the kids as Hanada coldly glared at me.
What are you doing here?
Oh, just observing.
Well, you're in the way. Go.
Okay.
And so I was unceremoniously kicked out of school. A real shame. In the midst of all this, we'd been all wrapped up from the festival for about a week's time. Things were calmer on the streets again, and the townspeople now had more time on their hands. So I decided to perform our test launch of the dungeon now that we had finished fine-tuning it. More than a few adventurers were excited about exploring it. We had already gotten a large number of requests, and I wasn't about to disappoint them. It was the start of a busier time than ever for me. On the first day of our dungeon's soft opening, problems erupted after only a few hours. It turned out that the challengers were a lot more inept at tackling it than I thought. This was something I predicted when we first revealed the dungeon at the Founders Festival, hence why we lowered the difficulty level. But everyone was taking so much time advancing through the chambers, making me realize that something needed to be done soon. There were no traps in the first floor. Any naturally occurring monsters who might show up were ranked F at the most, total wimps with no real fighting skills, creatures your average villager on the street could pummel. I designed it to help people get used to the labyrinth's atmosphere, so all it really contained were rooms with treasure chests and monsters guarding them. But I had already removed the traps Ramirez set up, so if you wanted to reach the next floor, you couldn't count on a handy pit trap taking you there, you needed to make a map. Even with everything involved, I figured the first floor could be conquered in a day of holing up in there at the most, no matter how slow you were. But in the past 3 days, the number of parties that made it to floor 2 was zip. Even Bisson's team gave up after getting hopelessly lost on the first floor. They had already experienced just how big the labyrinth was, but I guess they didn't bother taking any measures against it. It was really just exasperating, but if anything, Bisson was on the more decent side. Some of the parties were getting killed by the deranked monsters I had as room guardians. In fact, not some, a lot. The common theme was people lured by the treasure failing to notice the guardian creatures lining the rooms. I bet even the skeletal archers I had in there were surprised. They had all these adventurers sprinting toward the chests, giving them the chance to shoot them in the backs over and over again. We're talking a complete lack of fundamentals. No risk management. But at least those fools were smart enough to form groups. Because just when you think you've run into the biggest idiot, another one comes along to show that you're nowhere near rock bottom yet. Yes, some were even tackling the whole dungeon solo. That's beyond reckless and well into the realm of hopeless. You wouldn't encounter too many monsters on floor 1. As mentioned, random encounters were restricted to F ranks only. But even F-ranked monsters could be a threat if you had a big enough group of them. I guess. I mean, I wasn't entirely sure about that, but to them, they were a threat. Seriously, if you're tackling this solo, even finding a place to rest was a challenge. Nobody was keeping guard for you. You'd have no chance to get some shut-eye. And even an F-ranker wasn't completely helpless. Some of them weren't shy about attacking sleeping humans, so letting your guard down spelled death. I wondered if the solo questers had some ingenious scheme to handle this, but no, I don't think they really thought it through at all. It was hopeless, and they all were whisked out of the dungeon without anything to show for it. Clearly, at this rate, they'd never be able to survive the deeper levels. Floor 2 saw more random encounters in the corridors, including E-ranked monsters. By the time you make it past floor 5, I think you'd be seeing D-rank, even. If they're getting tripped up at this point, any D-ranked monster would have mangled them with one swipe. Among the more head-scratching cases were people who quit for the most pathetic of reasons: they had no food and got hungry. Save points were located on every 10th floor, and every 5th featured a safe, monster-free zone with drinkable water. We also amply warned people to bring a decent supply of food with them. But no. The other adventurers must have looked at the example Bisson set for their own preparations, but clearly that was not enough. Adventurers tend to be proud people, I suppose, and they definitely weren't into listening to instructions. A fair number of them didn't even bring any rations along. Maybe they felt safe, knowing they could be resurrected, or maybe they overestimated their own strength. I don't know, but regardless, they couldn't find their way back to the exit, so no wonder they started starving. Clearly, they had it coming. And I mean, I get it. I know people want to retrieve as much as they can from the treasure chests here. But if I was seriously intent on killing my challengers in this labyrinth, I don't think anyone would conquer it in 100 years. Still, most of this first wave of customers were broke bodyguards and mercenaries looking for a quick buck, none of them with much exploration experience. No need to panic yet, I thought, as I watched things unfold for 3 days. But in the end, not a single party made it to floor 5's safe zone. I could barely stand to watch. We made money from their admission fees, at least, so it was no loss for us. But if this keeps up, it'll kill adventurers' enthusiasm, and we'll lose any shot at repeat traffic. I figured we needed to reevaluate things from the ground up. This was far beyond expectations. I just wanted to bury my head in my hands. So I called for an emergency conference. This consisted of Veldora, Ramirez, Masayuki as an observer, and me. I also invited Mjolmile as the main businessman behind the dungeon. Once everyone was present, I spoke first.
Well, it's been about 3 whole days since we opened the labyrinth, but I think it's safe to say the results have been unsatisfactory. Or really, just crap. If we want this to be any fun at all, if we want our user base to keep coming back to the labyrinth, I think we'll need to give them some guidance.
The way things were going, I wasn't sure anyone would even reach floor 10. Everything about my plans for this place was in stasis. My conclusion: we needed to offer at least a little bit of strategic help for our users, or we'd never get anywhere.
Indeed, Rimuru is right. At this point, I'd need to wait until the end of time for anyone to reach me.
True. And I want people to see all my masterpieces below floor 50. I think people deserve some hints.
Along those lines, Veldora and Ramirez were in agreement. Masayuki was still thinking, or really, just standing there confused. I guess he wasn't too sure why I called him here. The invite came kind of suddenly, so I couldn't blame him, but he was bound to get into the swing of things soon. I'll call on him, then. I turned my eyes from him to Mjolmile, who looked pretty excited about getting to meet Masayuki the hero. Maybe that's why he so eagerly spoke up once he noticed my gaze.
May I offer my impressions?
Mjolmile asked.
Anything's welcome.
I said.
Give me your worst.
He nodded.
You mentioned offering hints, but I'd like us to approach that with a soft touch. It's still only been 3 days, and our challengers so far have all been from the lower ranks. We've asked the Free Guild to invite more seasoned adventurers for us, so I think we'll see more rated C and above from here on.
Do you think that'll work out?
I do. I have trouble figuring out Sir Yuki's motivations sometimes, but he's always true to his word. He's been sending magical communication to advertise to free guild offices worldwide on our behalf.
Yeah, it'd benefit the guild, too. Anything else?
Yes, I've been using my own connections with other merchants. We've been reaching out to more talented bodyguards, as well as their friends. According to the feedback I've received, we've had quite a good reaction so far.
Relaying the news and gauging the results were both key. I had asked Soka, leader of Team Kurayami, to work with Mjolmile and help him on those fronts. The two of them had led the labyrinth presentation together. Mjolmile was always good when dealing with people, and they had quickly broken the ice. I was glad to see there was no discrimination involved there. Soka's team was now following Mjolmile's instructions, and actually, Soe was as well. At the moment, Soe was tracking the movements of Duke Muse and the people around him, but when that didn't occupy him, he was meant to help advertise my nation a little. Now rumors of the dungeon were spreading even to little country towns, places not big enough for a free guild post.
So you don't think it'll be too late if we wait for some more talented challengers to travel here from afar?
Exactly. We've only just kicked this off. In my personal opinion, we shouldn't expect instant results. Better to settle down and focus on our long-term future. And once the noble ranks worldwide begin to invest in us, we can expect to see challengers ranked B and above before long.
Mjolmile certainly sounded passionate. Masayuki gave him some appreciative nods, which made him visibly grin. He must have been bursting to show off to the hero. But he did have a point. Maybe all Veldora's and Ramirez's complaining was making me feel a needless sense of urgency. Even Bassone's band was rated B as a team. With their current equipment, the individual members would rank about AC or C+ at best, not exactly outstanding. Once we started seeing single party members ranked B or above, I figure they'd be used to labyrinth work without too many hints.
That's it for this video, guys. Thank you for always watching my videos and supporting my channel. Shoutout to Night Gazer, Mark Nathan Padua, Skaters Corner Store, Bill Power, Wubbalubadubdub, Rambaru, MacD Gandalera, Crimson Dawn, Best Isis, and last but not least, shoutout to Captain of the Royal Knights Izvestia Pieris. I'll see you guys in the next video.